Is Jeff Hunt. Thank you, Ethan. I am the procurement coordinator for the Oregon Department of Land Conservation and Development. Today you are attending a pre-proposal conference for our RFP number S-66000-0007281, which is the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis, Community Engagement, and Housing Planning and Compliance Assistance RFP. The purpose of this conference is to provide you all the opportunity to ask questions of us regarding the content of the proposal or the process. We also provided the opportunity to ask questions in writing as well. The deadline for submittal for questions that will be responded to in writing was last Friday. If you did happen to ask questions via email, those answers will get posted tomorrow, or actually this afternoon by 5 o'clock, since I'm off tomorrow. Anyway, but you can ask the same questions today if you'd like, although again, they will be responded to in writing tomorrow. Just a very brief casual agenda. Again, I'm Jeff Hunt. As soon as I'm done with my overview, we will have introductions from both our internal staff and all the participants. And then we'll go ahead and have the housing team give an overview of the project. And then we'll go ahead and go into the questions and answers and try to devote about an hour to that if it goes that long. And then at about 2:25, I'll go ahead and do a final conclusion and wrap up. So with that, Ethan, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and we'll go from there?
Sure. Thanks, Jeff. Welcome, everyone. My name is Ethan Suckmeyer. I'm the Housing Services Division Manager at the Department of Land Conservation and Development. I'm really looking forward to the conversation, hearing what questions you all have, and kicking off this process. Jeff, I'll go to the DLCD folks that I see on the screen. We'll start with Mari.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mari Valencia Aguilar. I am a housing planner with the department. I use she, her, they pronouns. Nice to see you all. Go ahead, Sean.
Hey, folks. Sean, edging he, him pronouns. I'm a housing planner with the Department of Land Conservation and Development. Sorry for being off camera. I was just housing my lunch right before this meeting. So
1 o'clock meetings. How about Amy?
Yeah. Hey, y'all. Oh, I wasn't on mute anyway. Hey, everybody. I'm Amy Metler, the CFO. She, hers pronouns, and it's great to join you all today.
Okay, if we want to go ahead and start, let's see, the first person I see is, how about Ben?
Great, thanks, Jeff. Good to see everybody. Ben Duncan, I'm a Senior Director with Kearns and West.
Okay, and then how about Jamie?
I'm Jamie Harvey with JLA Public Involvement. We provide facilitation and public involvement services.
Okay, lost my spot. Sorry about that. How about Matt? Go ahead.
Hey, Matt Hasty with MIG. We provide housing and community engagement and other services. Glad to see everybody.
Beth?
With Echo Northwest, we provide housing services and work a lot in facilitating discussions with stakeholders.
All right, Steve?
Hi, everyone. Steve Faust with 3J Consulting. We provide land use planning and community engagement services.
All right, then we'll go to Mary.
Hi, I'm Mary Chase, she, her pronouns, and I'm also with Echo Northwest.
Okay, Bridger.
Hi, everybody. Bridger Weinman, he, him, Enviro Issues. We do public involvement.
All right, then it looks like Chris.
Hi, Chris Green, Planning Manager with OTAC.
All right, let's see, Ellen.
Hi everyone, Ellen Palmquist. I'm with Kearns and West, and we provide facilitation and engagement services.
And then Lorelei.
Hi everybody, Lorelei Gentleman, also with Echo Northwest. We do economic and policy analysis.
And then Deb.
Hi, good afternoon. Deb Myhoff with Communitas. I do planning, policy, engagement, and facilitation.
All right, and then is it Demi? Did I
Yes,
pronounce
hello
it correct?
everyone. Hi, my name is Demi Hill. I'm a principal consultant with Advocates for Human Potential, and we provide housing planning and technical assistance nationally.
Thank you. Darcy?
Hi, everyone. I'm a principal and project manager with MIG and here with Matt today. Nice to see everybody.
Let's see. Who have I missed? Virginia?
Hi, everyone. I'm Virginia Flores. I'm Senior Director at the National Development Council. We do affordable housing and economic development consulting services to public and nonprofit clients.
Thank you. Brendan?
Hello, everyone. I'm Brendan Buckley with Johnson Economics. We work on housing capacity analyses and forecasts and housing production strategies.
Thank you. How about Adam?
Hi, everyone. I'm Adam Lopez. I'm here with Echo Northwest as well.
And then is it Andre or Andrea?
Hi, this is Andre Tremolay with Commonworks Consulting. I do a lot of fair housing policy work, and I'm keeping my video off just because I've got a health issue today.
All right, thank you. Let's see. Did I miss anyone? No? Okay, great. Thank you very much for introducing yourselves. What we'll do during the question and answer session, there's quite a few of you online here, so I'll try to keep it as straight as I can, but please use the hand raise function if you have a question. I'll try to track it and call on you in order the best I can, but I can't guarantee that it's going to go real well, but we'll give it our best shot here. So let's go ahead and open it up, unless anyone from DLCD team has any further comments, or we all good, ready to go?
Hey, Jeff, could we just do a quick overview of the projects?
I'm sorry, Ethan. I'm jumping ahead there.
All good, all good. So I'm going to just start.
Overexcited.
The questions are the most important part of today. So
yeah,
that's
go
fair.
ahead, Ethan. I'll let you kick it off.
I'm just going to do a really, really quick intro, and then I'm going to hand it over to Sean to describe some of these project details in more depth. But obviously, this RFP is a lot of work products. It's complex in its scope, and our hope for today is to be able to answer the questions that you all have, to feel like you're comfortable coming out of the other side of this meeting, submitting proposals for all of these work products. The other thing I want to note, and we'll touch on this a little bit more detail, is that one of the elements of this RFP was contingent upon legislation that did not pass in the Oregon legislative process, and that is the Housing Accountability and Production Office, HB 3414. That element of work is slightly tweaked, and we'll talk about how we're kind of pivoting the work products therein. So I'm going to hand this over to Sean, and he'll do some more detailed conversation on that.
Get into the weeds. Thank you, Ethan. Hi, folks. So I'll speak maybe to the context of the individual work products as you kind of see them in that first part of the RFP. I'm starting on page 5. And I'll start at the top with pieces related to the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis. This is really going to be specific to work products 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, and then also 3.2, the equitable rulemaking consultant. And basically this comes out of a direction that DLCD received from the Oregon legislature as part of House Bill 2001 passed during the 2023 session that requires us to undergo a very extensive rulemaking process in relationship to Goal 10, Goal 14, and a new housing accountability statute that was set up. I won't go into too much detail on like what all the specific parameters are. I would suggest if you want to learn more about this, definitely there is the bill language. There's also a lot of supplemental materials, including from DLCD, that are available on OLIS that I would highly encourage reading into. There are a bunch of materials on our website specific to the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis process that I would encourage looking into. And then we're actually going to be kicking off the rulemaking in a public meeting at the Land Conservation and Development Commission this July at their regularly scheduled meeting. So highly encourage staying attuned because we'll be publishing a lot of contextual materials that describe what we're doing. But in short, really, this process is about reshaping the implementation of Goal 10 from what has historically been more of kind of just a narrow land accounting exercise to something that really is focused on increasing housing production, affordability, and choice, and recentering the implementation of Goal 10 on that. There's going to be different components of it, pieces that are really related to kind of housing needs and production, and reorienting Goal 10 around that implementation. There's going to be parts that are related to kind of housing capacity and urbanization. Specifically, how do you provide kind of greater clarity and certainty for local governments that are going through this process to give them relative assurance in terms of the methodologies and assumptions they employ, that these will be acceptable. And then the third part is operationalizing a housing accountability statute that was included in the bill itself. This is going to be a very extensive process. We're going to expect a need for a lot of different services and consultant support, and we identify 4 of them here. One is for rulemaking advisory committee facilitation, professional facilitation, because there are going to be a lot of public meetings that are associated with this, and we'll need that expertise. There's going to be a very heavy technical analysis component of this, not only in terms of the kind of analytical components around Goal 10 and Goal 14, but also one of our tasks is developing adoption-ready policies that support housing production, affordability, and choice. That will take a lot of technical expertise and analysis. And then for any rulemaking, we have to adopt impact statements, specifically fiscal impact statements, housing impact statements, and racial equity impact statements. These are requirements by the state, and we have kind of form and formats that we have to abide by whenever we do rulemaking. And then, of course, in the context of making sure that we're centering Goal 10, the implementation of Goal 10 around fair and equitable housing outcomes, right? Having specialized expertise in kind of equity, there's going to be a very heavy fair housing component in this rulemaking as well. That will be very important for us to have as well. All right, I'm going to move on to the technical assistance program support. These are ongoing kind of responsibilities of local governments in the implementation of Goal 10 that we provide consultant support for, as well as direct grants to support local governments. The House Bill 2001 allocated funding, and there were some other bills that passed the allocated funding to support local governments in this work. There are 4 types of services that we're procuring here. That's 2.1 through 2.4. This includes a housing capacity analysis, sometimes called a housing needs analysis. Essentially, this is a document that determines whether or not a city has enough land inside their urban growth boundary to accommodate their housing needs. The second document is a housing production strategy. This is the document that is a city's game plan of how they're going to facilitate housing production, affordability, and choice over a 6 or 8 year time frame. There's a housing implementation project, which is essentially a catch-all for anything that's not an HNA or HPS or HCA or HPS. And it can be a variety of things, anything from funding plans to, any number of things. There's a lot of different pieces that could be part of a housing implementation project. And then finally, one additional service that we haven't provided in the past are pieces related to Goal 14 technical assistance. So this includes UGB amendments, UGB land exchanges, and urban reserve and rural reserve planning, and kind of concept planning and public facilities planning to make sure that land's ready for development once it's brought into the UGB. So that's pieces related to the technical assistance program. I'm going to move just really quickly to the equitable decision making. I've talked about 3.2, but part of our agencies and our commission's priorities in our grant allocation plan is ensuring that when we are doing projects and we are funding projects, we are emphasizing both equitable engagement and outcomes. And the intent of this is to have a kind of a team with expertise specifically in approaching projects and making sure that it's embedding equity both into its processes and outcomes for all of our projects, right? So they'll kind of take that broader lens, and they'll also develop, I believe, recommendations for us as well in the implementation of equity and engagement. And then finally, I'll move on to number 4. There's a change here. Recognizing that we wanted to get started on this process early to give as much time as possible for the projects themselves, we released this before we knew what the legislative picture entirely looked like. And part of that included a governor's priority bill that was House Bill 3414 that included technical assistance and direction for the standing up of a housing accountability and production office. This bill did not pass, but portions of the work are still going to be necessary. So 4.1 statutory compliance, what essentially this is, the HAPO as is the kind of acronym for it, what they would be kind of responsible for is providing technical assistance to local governments to essentially do code amendment projects to comply with state law. That would be things like embedding middle housing in their codes or making sure their codes are clear and objective, that type of thing. And even though this office is not going to be stood up with the non-passage of this bill, we are still going to be doing code amendment projects. So we need to have that expertise. We have several bills that have included direction to this effect, including not just House Bill 2001, but also House Bill 3395 and Senate Bill, was it 406?
406.
Yeah.
Yes.
Both of which require cities to update codes, and we'll need that expertise for that in particular. But the second piece, 4.2, the building and zoning code report, that was something that was explicit direction in the bill, and the bill's no longer here. So that's a moot item. So the one thing I'll also add is that we expect as a governor's priority bill that this concept is probably going to come back at some point in the future. So we do think it's important to kind of maintain and solicit that expertise now, so we don't necessarily have to open a full process later as well. So that's kind of, in short, like what these different pieces are and the context behind them. And I'm happy to move into question and answer. I think that's going to be the most important part here. Oh, I should mention, I think Jeff mentioned that we're going to publish a question and answer document. There were about, I think, 24 questions that we got that we developed answers for. We're going to include a recording of this presentation, a link to that recording on that document. And additionally, I believe we also published an amendment to the RFP, kind of noting that change to 4.2. I think we included a little addendum saying, hey, the bill didn't pass, but we still have work to do.
Sean, I'll kick us off to lead the way. Adam, I see you jumped in too, but I guess I beat you. Can you talk about the distinction between kind of the rulemaking facilitation and the relationship with the rulemaking consultant? And my sense is, right, that the rulemaking facilitation should bring in equitable practice and process, but there's a distinction between that and the rulemaking consultant that's really looking at it through what, like a fair housing lens? Or can you talk about kind of, is that the same people? Should it be different folks?
It can be the same people and it can be different folks. These are essentially distinct services that we know are going to be necessary as part of the rulemaking process. Like we know that professional facilitation services, for example, is different than, say, having fair housing or equity or engagement expertise, right? So recognizing that these are kind of two different types of services, saying, all right, we think that these warrant their own categories. Of course, as I think we've indicated too, and we'll reinforce this in the questions and answers, we encourage building teams that, meet multiple different work product types as well. So that's totally acceptable.
Good, thank you.
Adam?
Hey, Jeff, how's it going? I have a couple questions actually. The first one, they're related to the actual RFP and proposal. First big question is around the references. I see that we've attached a reference form. I just wanted to gain clarity on, is that something we fill out and then you're contacting the reference, or do we contact the reference with the form and turn it in with already completed?
Do you want to speak to that? I don't know the answer to that question.
I'll defer to Jeff on that. Yeah.
You provide the references and then we will reach out to them.
Okay, so just looking for the top part, the contact information.
Right.
Perfect, thank you. And then the other question relates to the page limit. It says proposal is limited to 50 pages, but then it also says that we can submit individual proposals for each work product. So assuming does that mean you potentially could have, we're thinking about grouping some of the categories, the work products in the single category to submit 2 50-page proposals. Would that be okay? Or is this just 50-page?
I think what we decided internally was that you could submit more than one proposal for each or for the separate product categories.
Okay, for the categories.
So, yeah.
Perfect. Okay, that's there. I have one more question. Let me grab it real quick. On the page limits, I was just curious if like it mentioned like 2-page resumes or narratives on the key staff. Is that part of the 50-page limit? I know there was some exclusions, but those weren't on there.
Yes, the resumes.
And the key
if
staff
I remember correctly, the resumes do count towards the page limit.
Okay.
Let me pull up real quick. Just bear with me for a second here.
Section on page 12, section 3.2.2 shows a list of excluded that don't count towards it. But then I noticed it mentioned the resume page limit later. So
this is a sneak peek of the question and answer document.
Yep. Okay, so I don't remember what question number that was. Sorry.
I think you're getting pretty close there. It's down toward the bottom.
Okay.
I think I'm seeing it. It's question 17.
All right. Okay, so can you all see the answer here in red?
Mm-hmm.
The only items that do not count towards the 50-page limit are the items that are attachment numbers B, C, D, and F, and then and G, plus your price proposal and work samples, resumes, narratives, and let's see. Sorry, let me back up.
Okay.
Resumes, narratives, covers, and terms and conditions do count towards the page limit.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate for clearing that up.
So don't get too fancy.
Mm-hmm.
All right, it looks like Matt was next.
Yeah, and I have a few questions, so bear with me, or you can tell me to stop and come back and I'll ask more later. So my first one kind of goes back to Adam's question about the multiple proposals versus one proposal. And I'm asking this question because, you know, if let's say my firm plans to submit a proposal or proposals on like 6 or 7 or 8 of these items, that's a lot of proposals. And the last time y'all did this, it was, and you had sort of multiple categories of things. It was submit one proposal. Some of the sections of the proposal kind of can cover multiple work products as you've kind of defined them. And then we needed to have the implementation plans associated with each work product type, and we needed a budget associated with each product type. But like the key staff resumes could cover, you know, multiple product types. So I just want to make sure I'm really clear on this, so that we know kind of what we're doing in terms of one proposal that's got some common elements versus some elements specific to individual product types versus a bunch of different proposals. Clearly different, you know, sort of level of effort there potentially. So that's one question, and then I'll ask some more.
Can I speak to that? Because I've been giving it a little bit of thought, because the main thing at the end of the day, what we want to understand from proposers is the skills and expertise, and we lay them out in the kind of criteria that we're evaluating, including like knowledge of state law, all those different pieces. We want to make sure that we can answer that question specific to each work product type, right? So it doesn't necessarily take an individual proposal for housing capacity analyses, an individual proposal for housing production strategies, an individual for HIPs, if a lot of the skill sets cross over. But we know that not everybody who does a housing capacity analysis does a housing production strategy, does Goal 14 planning assistance, right? Those can be very different skill sets. And so what we want to be able to answer at the end of the question, whether you do it group multiple project types into one proposal or separate them out, is that ultimately we can answer the question, hey, with regards to a housing production strategy, have they demonstrated that they, meet these different criteria in the context of the experience that we asked for in the context of the RFP? That's at least how I think about it. Jeff or Ethan, I don't know if you guys have additional thoughts.
No, I agree. Yeah, that's the end goal for us, is to be able to make a definitive determination on whether, that proposal meets the qualifications necessary to do the work.
Okay, so I'm going to try to sort of paraphrase what maybe I think I heard, which is that we could submit one proposal if we thought we could cover all the bases for all the product types we're pursuing, or we could submit multiple proposals. Maybe we'd submit one that was sort of everything under category 2, another one under category 3, something like that. But it sounds like we've got a certain amount of flexibility there, and I understand what it is you're trying to achieve and kind of judge with the proposals. So is that a fair interpretation?
Yeah, I think so. I think the key persons on those projects may be different even within the same firm. So
yeah,
it makes sense to,
yeah.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. I'm going to ask another sort of similar question. Maybe it's kind of answered by that already, but it relates to references. And I guess the question is, do we need to make sure that the references represent all of the product types that we're proposing on? So that it doesn't say that, but I would think that would be helpful, but I don't know if you need that, or anyway.
I believe it's 3 references per proposal. We did receive that question.
Yeah. Okay. But not necessarily per product.
Yes.
Right.
That is correct.
Okay. Another question relates to, so there's requirements in the RFP about the information that we provide for key persons. Should we be providing any additional qualifications for other folks we would use on a project who may not meet the key person's qualification, but would be supporting the effort?
I personally don't think it would hurt. Ethan and Jeff, I don't know if you guys have thoughts.
I agree, but it is part of your 50-page limit, so keep that in mind.
Yep. Okay, I got just a couple more. Sorry I had to take up so much time here, but hopefully other people had some more questions. I had a couple questions about the cost proposals. So, and maybe some are already answered in your written responses to other questions. Last time you did this, you had some forms that we used to sort of give you the cost proposals. So we don't have those now, so it's a little more open. My questions have to do with sort of the fact that there could be, on some of these product types, a pretty good range of costs, and you do include information that says, talk about, how costs can differ. But my question is, can we provide a cost range, or you really just want one number for each product type and then to tell you what things could differ? And I asked that because you asked for estimated travel costs, and those could differ pretty significantly. If I'm working in Baker City or I'm working in Newburgh, pretty different travel costs. So I'm kind of curious about how you want to see that information.
Let's go to Jeff on that one.
Yeah, and I understand that that's one of the difficulties of doing an RFP of this nature. I think really what we're looking for, and this is for everyone here, everyone that will submit a proposal. I think what we would like is for you to pick a middle ground and submit a proposal for what an average project would take to complete. Do you guys, Ethan, Sean, do you guys concur?
If I can add some context, because I actually learned something in thinking about this cost proposal piece, because we hit on it and we were like, well, these costs vary, depending on the project type and a bunch of different factors. But we learned that there are, I believe, 2 types of bids that DAS has specific kind of instructions around. One is it's just like you're competing on a cost for something, like if you're buying chairs and it's just the lowest cost. But this is one where you're trying to kind of assess the best value. So you have to ask what the cost proposal is. But I think we intuitively understand, and just from our experience, that these costs can vary significantly based on a lot of different factors, right? Like where the city is, how much do they support like remote meetings, those types of things. How much engagement do they want? And so I think what we're trying to get a sense of in the cost proposal is not like a hard and fast, like this is what it will cost the project to, any project that you give us, but more like, well, based on our experience with this project type or that type of thing, or our understanding of the typical deliverables associated with a project like this, we could expect this project to generally run about this much, but it's going to vary based on the level of engagement, the level of travel, and here's how you could expect that variation to play out. I think the greater detail you can provide us in the context of like, well, you can expect more cost for this or less cost for this, I think will be helpful in evaluating that as one of the factors for the purposes of this proposal. Ethan, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I was just trying to think about how you might approach that. You could try to approach it of like this menu of options where you have the base, what you might estimate just like the run of the mill, project, if it's a housing capacity analysis, what that might take. And then, if you add this increased engagement, this is how much that, might add to that cost. Or if we're talking about in-person meetings every time, then that's what this might add. So you could approach it that way, but yeah, I think it's give us a good estimate of your estimate, and we can kind of go from there. But the total amount that might be dedicated to each project is going to vary, and we don't have the applications from the local governments even at this point, particularly for the kind of category 2 of the work products.
And maybe just one guiding principle that might be worth thinking about is that we're looking for value per cost, not necessarily the lowest cost. So that should be helpful.
Okay, that's great. One more.
Sorry, Matt, if I can just add a couple clarifying statements there. I do need a fixed cost to be able to score price. So if you did provide a range, then what I would have to do is select the highest range to use for my cost calculation. But also, just FYI, cost is 1/5 of the overall score. So the strength of the rest of your proposal is 4/5 of the scoring criteria. So just keep that in mind. Yeah, in order to fairly score the cost, though, I do need to have a fixed price to work.
All right. Thank you for all of that. One more quick question related to cost, and that is just you asked for billing rates. And so for key staff, we can provide the rate, but often we have project associates working on projects. They have a range of rates. I understand you want a fixed cost, a single cost number. We can talk about how they vary, but for billing rates, I'm wondering about providing a range for people who are not, and we can give you an average, but it just varies, and it's going to continue to vary. So,
one other thing that I meant to mention as well is that remember that the proposal evaluation and scoring is going to be used to rate and evaluate the proposals we received. We will then make a determination after we finalize the scoring process on who we are going to award contracts to. Once we get into that contract negotiation stage, then at that point, we will identify individual projects for each consultant, and we will negotiate the price for the contract based on what it's going to take to complete each of those projects. So this RFP, though, is to establish a pool of consultants to work with. So just keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, totally understand. I just want to make sure we give you the information that you want. And so that's why I asked about the cost or the billing rate range, or do you just want, here's an average for, associates?
I think an average for associates makes sense. I mean, in the same way that like adding the associates that you would expect to work on a project, I think it couldn't hurt. I don't think we asked for it explicitly in the RFP, but
all right, cool.
That's my sense.
Agreed.
At the risk of monopolizing the conversation, I'm going to ask one more question, and I think I'll stop and see if.
All right, yeah, then we'll call stop. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry about that. My other question is just has to do with kind of relationship between the services in, I think it's the engagement 3.1, and the services in the 2 point, I guess, in the HCA, HPS, HIP projects. Like, are you thinking about like hiring more than one firm? You might like supplement somebody you submitted on a HPS with somebody you submitted on engagement services. Like, I just want to kind of understand what the thinking is there in terms of how you've laid out those services in particular.
Yeah.
Ethan, did you want to speak to this? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So the hope in task 3 or work product 3.1 is that there is somebody to assist either the department or the cities in creating that kind of equitable community engagement process or a plan or something like that. So I think there could be a possibility where we kind of supplement a project team that maybe has the expertise in the planning work, but maybe not in the community engagement process, and kind of create like this joint team. I think that's a possibility, but I think the primary role of that 3.1 work product is to assist the department and the local governments in doing that community engagement work, or at least getting that set up. And, as part of that, doing the best practice recommendation for the department at large. So it's that 3.1 really focused on community engagement in those technical assistance projects in particular.
Okay.
I don't know if that answered your question, Matt.
Yeah, good enough. Yeah. All right. Thank you very much. Thanks for all the time on all my questions, and for putting my hand down. I was about to do it.
Yeah, no, thanks, Matt. Chris, thank you for your patience.
No problem. Those were good questions to hear. I was wondering on, for instance, 4.2 and maybe a little bit on 4.1, you mentioned that you think that legislation may be reintroduced, or some of those elements may kind of come back. Are you looking to have people propose on those in case they come back in the interim?
So for we write on this in the written document, so there's a lot more comprehensive feedback there. But to say 4.2, so that building that report, that was something that was explicitly outlined in the bill, saying you have to do this DLCD, and you need to consult with somebody to do that. That bill, because that bill doesn't exist anymore, I would not expect that we would do this as part of this RFP necessarily, unless a bill got introduced later that included that specific element. 4.1, however, we know that there's going to be work that is related to code amendments. Like, we know that a bill was just passed to extend the duplex provisions to cities between 2,500 and 10,000, for example. There's another bill that was passed that extends middle housing provisions to all the cities in Tillamook County. And we know there's a bunch of cities that will be requesting code amendment projects as part of just our standard technical assistance and planning assistance, funding. And so we know that we need code services. So we actually highly recommend still, if you have code amendment expertise, applying for 4.1 in particular, it won't be under the HAPO necessarily, but it would be in that vein. And then later on, as we expect this to be a governor's priority, and it might be introduced in a future session, though we don't know what the legislature will do, as is clearly indicated with this amendment. It would be useful to have that bench of expertise, so that way we know who we can call on for future HAPO related work, if it comes to pass. Ethan, would you? Yeah.
Just one. Oh, sorry, Chris.
So in regards to 4.2, then would you, if that requirement came back in future legislation, would you do like a new RFP for that one, or is that something we should sort of consider as part of our proposal on this round, and then somebody might get picked up to do that one if that gets introduced in the next session?
We kind of don't know, because it depends how much it costs, like how much a report costs. Because we have certain procurement requirements for projects that are above a certain amount, and if it's not a lot of time and resources that's expended into the building and zoning code report, we might not need to release an RFP. But if it is, we have to. So if we don't have any proposers on this, yeah. But Ethan, please.
I would say also we do not currently have an appropriation from the state legislature to do that work. So it's all contingent upon future legislation, so it's hard to answer the question. I will say, however, should something like a housing accountability and production office become a reality in the future, I would, it's hard to predict what future Ethan, Sean, and Madi might do, but the first place we would probably go is to the pool of consultants that we've hired to do code work, under this RFP.
Okay, thank you. That helps.
All right, was that it, Chris?
Yes.
Okay, Lorelei?
Okay, hi. My question relates to category 1. And first, I just want to make sure I'm understanding correctly what our options are. If I'm getting it correct, it sounds like we can either propose a team that can do all of the work products in category 1, or we can propose to complete an individual work product. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay,
that
awesome.
is right.
So then my question is, how are you thinking about the selection process? If you've got some individual consultants that are coming in with just one work product proposed relative to others that have put together an entire team, are you thinking about it as a mix and match? And how can we best position our proposal given that complexity that you'll be facing?
Yeah, no, that is a good point. And I think one of the things we have to acknowledge is that, like, while the work products in the second category, so the technical assistance program support, as well as the code amendment, those lend themselves to having a bench of consultants, right? So, having more than one proposer be part of the team, and then we can go from there. The work products in section 1, as well as the equitable rulemaking consultant in 3.2, those are going to be essentially kind of the most competitive for that individual work product. So I think what we would be looking for is, in the context of each of those work products, which team, which proposer has submitted essentially the strongest proposal in the context of that work product, and then figure out the contracting after we've made that decision. So it is possible it could be one team, it's possible it could be multiple. Either way, there will be some facilitation and collaboration that will have to happen as part of that rulemaking in order for it to be effective.
So you'll essentially be looking at each individual work product's proposal within the larger category, even if it's been submitted as a team.
Yes.
To compare to other potential. Okay.
Yeah. Ethan, do you have anything you'd add to that?
Yeah, Lorelei, I see what you're talking about. Say you proposed on the technical analysis and not on the facilitation, yeah. Okay. So.
Or if we put together a whole team and then you like somebody else for facilitator that wasn't the person that was on the team.
Right. Exactly. Okay. Well, I think in terms of the overall like key persons of those work products, I think reviewing those application or those proposals in total makes a lot of sense. But gosh, let me do some thinking on that. Maybe I can respond as part of this meeting still.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, Steve.
Yeah, just to further, I think, build on what Lorelei said, or hopefully clarify, I think it comes down to then, is there going to be a pool for each category or each work product? You know, is there a pool for 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 2.1, et cetera, et cetera? That's kind of where my question lies along those same lines.
The category 1 and the category 3, that's likely just one consultant doing those work products, or a team, a proposal team doing those work products. Category 2 is a bench of consultants that we can draw from, very similar to how we've operated in the previous biennium.
And category 4.1, the code amendment work.
Sorry. Yes, 4.1 as well.
Steve, you still look a little concerned. Do you need further clarification there?
No, I think I understand. So if you, yeah, you'll have a pool that can do a lot of the work products within category 2. Some of them might be selected to do all 4 products, while others may be focused on one product, and they'd be part of that pool.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
And does that make sense to everyone else on the call?
Yeah,
any other questions?
At the risk of being more confusing, I might try to describe category 1 and particularly 3.2 in a little bit more detail. I think the consultants chosen for each of those work products create the overall rulemaking project team that will be part of, meetings about the rulemaking process and, working on draft rules and all of that kind of stuff. That's one person can fill each of those roles within, or one project team can fill the various roles of each of that within that project team, as opposed to like a bench of consultants that we draw from in that process.
And I can see the understanding, like maybe the rationale of like, oh, maybe this should have been 2 RFPs, but I think we were making the deliberate decision of, we've done past processes that involved many, many RFPs, and I think we wanted to try to stick it to one mega RFP this round. So that is something to consider. But yeah, Ben.
Well, I guess, Ethan, just following up really quickly, I don't know if you can answer this question. Is there an advantage, for example, of teaming for all of category 1, so 1.1, 2, and 3, based on relationship and trust, and right? Like, if you're looking at it as a package, I guess, is there an advantage to teaming up? Or is it better to say, okay, we'll just do 1.1, you do 1.2, we'll hope for the best, and try to work together?
We want you guys to build the best teams, and like, we want to encourage collaboration. So to the extent that you think like a team approach is a better construction to those different work products, we encourage that, right? We think that can be a strength. But also at the same time, I don't think the intent was to foreclose the opportunity to apply for a particular work product, right? Say if there was a team that specialized in 3 of the 4, right? Still being able to solicit that expertise. But I think that was the intent.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And then just to, maybe I've already heard this, but to clarify, you could apply as a team, and maybe Lorelei, this is what you were saying earlier. You might be chosen, for example, for technical work. And even though you wrote an application with a facilitation team, you all could choose a different facilitation team to come and do 1.1. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's what I'm wrestling with currently.
We could. Yeah.
Would we be in a position where we, pull apart various elements of a proposed team? That sounds like not the best way to approach that decision-making process, I'll be honest.
All right, well, you said it, Ethan.
We could.
This is all being recorded.
We will have to grapple with that as our cross to bear.
That is very true.
Seen it done and had it done.
Okay. All right. So there's precedent.
Deb,
Yeah.
you have a question?
Yeah, it's on this same topic. I think I just heard the answer, but what I think I'm hearing is there's a disadvantage to teaming, especially on category 1, because there's always the risk that if you do a full team that's going to cover 1 through 3, category 1.1 through 1.3, but then somebody else comes in just proposing on 1.3, and that's who you really want for category 1.3. What happens with that team that has the full suite of stuff? Are we getting dinged for having a full team when you really just want to pick one for 1.3, and then you'll have to figure out how to cover the other 2 subcategories?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I think what would be the risk there is that a team that proposes for all 3 and includes it as one proposal, they might say be awarded 1.1 and 1.2, but then they wouldn't be awarded 1.3. So that's kind of the risk that's inherent to forming
Well, is that even
team.
a possibility? I guess I haven't heard yet that that's even possible. I heard you didn't want to pull things apart. So
I mean, I think that is the possibility. That is the cross that we have to bear.
This is the most important part
grappling.
for consultants here.
It
Yes.
is.
But yeah, no,
Understand that.
If there was a consultant team that, scored the highest in 1.1 and 1.2, but there was another consultant team that scored the highest in 1.3 that other consultant team applied for, to imply that we would reject their entire proposal because they're one team that proposed for 3 projects, that seems ludicrous, right? It would make more sense, even though it'd be probably a little bit painful in terms of contracting, to figure out how to split those responsibilities in terms of 1.2, 1.2. 1.1, 1.2, and then the other consultant team at 1.3, if that makes sense. So I guess if you can derive some advice from this, is probably design the individual teams to be modular based on the work products they're in.
Got it. Thank you.
Andre, I think you were next.
My apologies, I've had myself on mute. This is kind of driving in the same lane, and I think maybe you've already covered this, but so focusing for a second on 3.2, 2 questions about that. The first question is that it appears that is primarily focused, equity is a big topic. It appears that particular element is focused on the fair housing aspects of equity. Is that correct, or is it more broadly considered there?
To me, this strikes me as a yes and, but Ethan, do you want to speak to that?
I think it is. Andre, fair housing is part of that decision-making process that we, as DLCD staff, and then also hopefully the Land Conservation and Development Commission, when we go to them next month, to incorporate that fair housing directly into the work of this rulemaking. However, I think there is a broader role that consultant in 3.1 can play in decision-making related to equitable outcomes in the rulemaking at large, that is not just focused on fair housing, but is focused on other elements of housing planning and urbanization.
Okay, so to see if I hear you correctly, 3.2 is primarily focused on fair housing. 3.1 is more broadly focused on equity, or more broadly considering equity. Is that correct?
I think 3.2 is more like the policy in rulemaking requires us to be orienting Goal 10 towards achieving fair and equitable housing outcomes. That is the intent of that consultant team. That's the expertise they bring to the table. How do we structure this rulemaking to achieve those outcomes consistent with the legislative intent? Whereas 3.1 is more kind of like in our processes, right? In our individual projects that we're doing this biennium, in our interagency processes, and, just for local governments generally, when we're approaching projects, how do we design these projects and processes to be more equitable, right? In terms of the engagement and outcomes.
And I think that helps. One other question has to do with teaming versus individual pieces. You have a few of us on this call who are not generalists, and are more solo consultants that have maybe more of a focus on either being able to facilitate or maybe being able to advise on certain matters, equity or fair housing or stuff like that. In this particular approach to putting out an RFP, looking at it from our perspective, we can choose to team or we can choose to submit individually. Is there anything that you have any information about the RFP that you can share with us to help us understand what the best approach is or what considerations we might take into account?
Yeah, I mean, that's a question that I wouldn't even necessarily know the answer to. I think a lot of it depends on like the plan and the policy approach in rulemaking, which is, like, what do we think is best going to achieve the legislative outcomes that are prescribed in House Bill 2001? And that is not a question that I know how to answer in the context of an RFP. So I actually don't know what advice to provide a consultant team. But I would say, if you're trying to decide between, a team or an individual approach, what we care about at the end of the day is faithfully fulfilling the legislative direction and achieving housing affordability production affordability and choice in the state of Oregon. And to the extent that the rulemaking helps us do that, be it, individual consultants that apply or a broader team of people who have a good dynamic working together, that is, like, I think that's kind of your decision. Is it in my view. But
thank you.
Yeah, Ethan, I don't know if you want to add to that. We just want what's best for the state.
Didn't have anything to add. I think that's why we're all here. I didn't have anything to add to that, but I did want to go back to 3.1 and 3.2 just to describe that a little bit better and answer your question more directly, Andre or Dr. Tremblay. The 3.2 includes the work of fair housing. It also is not just the work of fair housing. There are other, equitable decision-making processes that are part of that, the expectation that consultant brings to the table. And it is not solely a fair housing, work product. I hope that clarifies. It's like a bigger boat than just fair housing.
That helps. Could you apply the same lens and tell me about 3.1 relative to that?
Yeah, so that is specifically about engagement with local government stakeholders in particular, and then working that into a toolkit or a set of recommendations for how DLCD and local governments can do engagement better in the future. So really focused on engagement in 3.1 and focused on equitable decision-making processes at large in the rulemaking process in 3.2.
I think that's a good way.
That helps.
All right, Steve, thanks for your patience. Go ahead.
Yeah. Question about teaming relative to 2.4, especially if we're looking, assisting a jurisdiction with urban growth boundary analysis. Some of that involves infrastructure, transportation. Should we be adding sub-consultants to our teams for that specific 2.4 that can perform that? Or is that something that we would assume that we could add firms to our team if assigned a project down the road?
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. Well, what we will be evaluating in the context of Goal 14 is that the proposer has the relevant experience and technical knowledge to successfully achieve Goal 14 related projects. So to the extent that, if you are deciding on a team, you want to make sure that that proposal includes very clearly that expertise on there. But when it comes to say well, maybe there's going to be a traffic impact analysis that needs to be done or something like that, those sub-consulting type positions, those come up after the RFP all the time, and we have flexibility to accommodate those later on, provided that overall the work is provided. What we really care about is making sure that the consultant team that we are contracting with for the purposes of Goal 14 planning have all of that relevant expertise in their team. Does that make sense?
I think you kind of lost me at the end. I mean, the traffic impact analysis or an assessment of efficient delivery of services, right, including pipes and roads and things of that nature, is part of that analysis. So I guess, do we need that expertise on the team for this proposal, or can it be added later?
I think it can be added later, provided that, again, you demonstrate what we're looking for is somebody who has experience and a lot of expertise in facilitating UGB amendments, UGB land exchanges, urban and rural reserve planning, and concept planning, right?
Understood.
And to the things that are peripheral to that, that's not what we're looking for in the context of the core expertise. We can subcontract for that.
Okay. And I just heard you say concept planning is considered part of that category?
Yeah. Essentially, the premise is when you bring lands into the UGB, they should be, you should concurrently, right, plan to make that land development ready, right? Otherwise, it just sits there. And so it's one of the services we'll be offering.
Yeah, and on the sub consulting thing, later on, there is a process to facilitate that subcontracting. There's, it gets really contract languagey, but basically the core of it is that DLCD just has to approve the sub consulting.
Yeah, I think in the same boat, it would be like, do you need to have, a graphic designer expertise, even though that might be very important for documents down the line that you produce? It's like, no, we can subcontract for that, that type of thing. But it's more about ensuring that the core work can be done.
Amy, you have a question?
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate how much thought has gone into this proposal, and our RFP, you called it a mega RFP, and thought around all the different services that you may need for a process like this and how they might all interact with one another. I guess this is just kind of a general question that's optional for you to answer if it feels relevant, but I know that DLCD has undertaken a variety of different rulemaking processes recently. There's also been a variety of other housing processes happening in the state. And so I was just curious, or wanted to provide the opportunity for you to comment whether you have any advice for the consultants, or things that you're looking for that you want to take from other processes, or things that you might like to see repeated or done differently in this process. So just if you have an answer to that. And if not, it's also fine. I just was curious whether you had specific things that you'd been bringing to this as you were kind of thinking through the RFP.
Yeah, that's a good question. Ethan, do you have thoughts right off the bat? Or
I think I think you can answer that question based on the kind of categories of work. So I'll try it first with category 1 in a rulemaking process. I think taking cues from the last housing rulemaking process that we engaged in, one of the things that worked really well was organizing those meetings. They were long meetings, and I think people got pretty exhausted as a result of that. So I think we're thinking about maybe trying to break those out into more frequent, less time intensive meetings. The rulemaking advisory committee and technical advisory committee membership. We've been, as an agency, growing or refining our understanding of how to craft the rosters for those. And so I think taking cues from the Climate Friendly and Equitable Communities Advisory Committee kind of recruitment process might be something that we employ this go round. In this particular one, the technical analysis is going to be pretty key to a successful rulemaking process there. And then in category 2, the technical assistance program, we're in an environment where cities, lots of cities, not just the cities with population above 10,000, are interested in doing housing planning work. And so our job as a state agency is to determine how and which projects to fund in now a limited resource environment in terms of the total amount of funding that we have. And so I think we'll be focusing mostly on those projects that are, in our perception, doing the most to facilitate the increased housing production, affordability, and choice. So that's kind of our guiding principle there. I don't know if that was super helpful.
I can add a little more because I think also another piece that was part of your question, Jamie. So yes, we have been thinking about past processes in terms of like how we want to think about this one. There are also concurrent things that we know are happening at the state level. For example, there's a Housing Production Advisory Council at the governor's office that's kind of thinking about policy concepts for the short session and future sessions. There is the climate friendly and equitable rulemaking process that just recently wrapped up, and we've learned lessons from that, as well as kind of coordinating with the structure of that rule and the kind of refinements they're making to that rule this fall. So yeah, there is coordination that we're doing in the context of this rulemaking, as well as lessons that we're learning from past processes that I think we'll try to fold into this. We've been giving it some thought. Right now, we're still reeling a little bit from the end of session, so it's going to take us a little bit of time. But yeah, I think we is the answer to the question.
That's helpful. Thank you.
We're already getting questions about how all of those efforts at the state level are kind of matching up or not. So
our inboxes are blowing up. It's been a lot.
I can imagine.
All right. Any other questions? Oh, Andre.
I'm wondering, since we have a few minutes left, if you could talk for just a minute, how would you characterize the climate-friendly and equitable communities rulemaking process, and how what were the innovations that you particularly want to pick up on and carry forward into this? What did you learn?
I'll speak only to process and not the rules. The membership or the recruitment process of CFEC, that Rulemaking Advisory Committee, took cues from the HB 2001-2003 rulemaking process from 2020 and improved. And I think the department's perception improved on that process. And I think we have an opportunity to yet again improve on that. So making decisions on who is at the Rulemaking Advisory Committee based on things like the state of Oregon demographics, things like different perspectives that are not traditionally at the table. Trying to manage how many people are on that Rulemaking Advisory Committee was another thing that the CFEC team did well in our perception, and trying to do some better pre and post advisory committee meeting work to make the process a little bit less jargony and technical and a little bit more focused on outcomes and more human focused kind of rulemaking process, as opposed to like super heavy technical work.
Yeah, and I think one of the things we're grappling with too is the fact that there is going to be a lot of technical work in this because of the nature of the work and the fact that it requires a lot of analysis and very specific understandings of state law. And what we don't want to end up in a position of is, having an environment where we are mixing these broader high-level policy conversations with these really in-the-weeds technical discussions and leaving people out in the dust because they can't grapple with one or the other, right? And so we're trying to think about the structure to kind of make that better. And we haven't totally landed, but we have at least a rough sense of what we would expect kind of the broad outline to look like.
Thank you.
Yeah, and if you want to learn more about that, listen into LCDC in July.
Chris, you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to confirm. So you guys mentioned being kind of reeling at the end of session, which I can definitely understand. For the local jurisdictions that would be working on this, are they still on that timeline of apply by July 31st, and then the funding would be like towards the end of this year as kind of the timeline when you think the actual like work would commence?
Good question.
Can I speak to timeline? I think, yeah, because what we did this last biennium too, just recognizing that, like, we don't want getting contracts executed kind of taking so long that you don't have a whole lot of time to do the work. We had that in our first go around, that just created a lot of pain for everybody involved. And so we kind of, this biennium, even though we knew session was ongoing, we didn't know what the fate of everything was. We wanted to get started early. So we published the grant application materials to give cities 2 months between early June to the end of July 31st to kind of apply. And we've simplified the process a little bit to make it more straightforward for them to apply. And so they're sticking to that timeline. Once we have those in hand, we take about a month to review them and make decisions about, what projects are going to receive funding. And then we kind of get into the nitty gritty of contracting. We have 2 types of contracts that we can have with local governments. Either we can just give them money directly if they want to onboard their own consultant team, or just pay their staff for work. That's a direct grant. Those tend to be faster because you don't need to have as much extensive, like, it's just one city that you're contracting with, right? And you don't have to have like DOJ review to the same extent. But then we also have the consultant contracts where we have multiple projects, right? There'll be multiple cities on an individual contract, and we kind of hash everything out and we implement it all at once. And those generally take a little bit longer. So we would expect a lot of the direct grants to be executed kind of around October, November-ish, and the consultant contracts to be executed kind of anywhere between November and early January, if it follows last biennium's timeline. So that's when we would expect kind of these projects to start kicking off in terms of timeline. I believe also we indicate in the RFP the timelines for when we make decisions about which like the consultant bench, that type of thing.
So is there, do you anticipate like a certain breakdown of how many places will be getting direct grant funding out of?
We have no idea
from this, or okay.
We won't know until August 1st. Yeah.
Yeah, it depends on a mixture of the city, like the city, how much they're requesting, how many cities are requesting, what types of projects they're requesting for, how much of the specifics are they asking for? Is it going to be very extensive engagement, for example, or are they not even, they're not detailing a whole lot? So we have to figure that out later. We have a lot of, there's a lot of figuring out that we have to do after cities submit applications for us to know.
Okay, so there's like a single pot of money, and depending on the nature of who applies and for what, then you'll divvy that out between the direct and the ones that go through this RFP.
Yeah, the pots of money are as follows. 2.1 through 2.3 is $2.5 million, and 2.4 is $1 million.
Roughly. The bill doesn't actually include that specific breakdown, but that's the expectation from the legislature, is roughly that. And then in addition to that, code amendment work actually can be funded through House Bill 2001 funds. And then there's an additional pot of funding that's coming out of 3395. That's 1.25 million specifically for code amendment work related to middle housing. But with 3414 not being adopted, we didn't get the additional pot of code amendment work, which was a much heftier sum.
Anyone else? Lorelei?
Just very quickly, do you anticipate any additional amendments that we should be watching for?
Amendments?
To the RFP.
Oh, to the RFP? No, because the legislative session wrapped up.
Yeah.
That was what we wanted to provide clarity on, was just saying, okay, we said if 3414 passes, we now know it doesn't pass. What now? This was what we wanted to answer.
It might be, I see Jeff wanted to potentially jump in there. There may be I don't know what there's vacations happening, but we might be able to provide more clarity on like that category 1, the teaming question. I think we may try to sneak that in somehow to the question and answer section. I don't know. Jeff can reel me in here if I'm speaking out of turn.
Well, we can definitely have more internal discussion about that, and if we feel that it's significant enough to provide an amendment on to give more clarification, we can certainly do that down the road a little bit further. I think though that we would like to have that clarified at least 2 weeks to 10 days prior to the close, just to make sure that people have a little extra time if needed. What I was going to say though, as well in regard to Lorelai's question, was that I will be posting question and answer document by the end of the day today. I am not sure within the Oregon Bias system how that is processed. I'm not sure if it sends out an email with that information or not. But if not, you can certainly go in and take a look at the RFP, tomorrow or Monday, and be able to pull up and download that question and answer document. Matt, you had a question?
Yeah, just kind of a quick clarification about what you just said. The Q&A, is that going to include what you'd already done or started, plus answers to the questions that were asked in today's meeting?
Good question, Matt. So the questions asked during this pre-proposal conference will not be responded to in writing. The questions that will be responded to in writing were the questions that were submitted via email prior to last Friday. So there's, I think there's 22 different questions and answers that were provided in that document.
Okay. I was also just going to make maybe a suggestion, which you may or may not be able to undertake based on what you just said. But that question about the references, that is not clear on the form, who's actually completing the form. And I would really suggest that you do provide a clarification of that in writing if it's not already part of what you're sending out today. Because when I looked at that form, I assumed that I would need to be sending that form out to my references and having them complete it and send it back. So I don't know that that's clear on the form, or we probably wouldn't have asked about it anyway. So that might be worth clarifying somehow to folks, whether it's in an addendum or just something.
All right, good point, Matt. I'll take a look at that. I think it was one of the questions that may have been asked in writing. And if it is, I'll take a look at the answer again and make sure that it's clear.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Appreciate that.
And then just to expand a little further, I think Sean made mention to it earlier. We will provide a link to the recording of this meeting as well, as opposed to providing written responses to questions asked and answered here. Okay, we still have about 7 minutes before wrap up. Does anyone else have questions? Go ahead, Steve.
Sorry, one more quick one. I think I heard that due to some of the work you all are doing internally, that you're not necessarily encouraging cities at this point in time for this round to apply for some of the work products. Could you talk about that briefly?
Yes, this is guidance we've been giving to local governments. So House Bill 2001 was adopted in March of this year. And as part of that, they essentially changed the entirety of the needed housing statutes and buildable land inventory. And they gave us direction to go forward and implement the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis. That means that cities will not have their needed housing numbers until January 1st of 2025. So if you are a city that has already done kind of housing capacity analysis work, you've been doing in the process and you're going to adopt, you'll be fine. LCDC has a provision that enables them to kind of usher in those who've already commenced an HCA. But if you are starting now, if you are wanting to pursue an HCA, you would essentially be getting in a situation where you'd be developing an HCA that's not consistent with statute. So our advice is, hey, hold off on it for this biennium. The process will be much better in the forthcoming biennium. There'll be a lot more clarity, and there'll be a lot greater likelihood of success. We won't be in a situation where we have statutory conflict. Of course, we're still asking for proposals related to housing capacity analyses for two major reasons. One is that we intend this RFP to provide us qualified consultants for beyond the biennium, so including the forthcoming biennia. And then secondly is that there are some communities that have commenced their HCA but still have some work to do. So we need that expertise as well.
Is it possible that some components of a housing capacity analysis, like a buildable lands inventory, project like that might come in maybe as a housing, the HIP or something?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, there might be an instance where we would want something like half of a buildable lands inventory because the statutes there weren't as muddled up by the House Bill 2001. Yeah, Deb.
At the risk of this not being well received, I'm just going to ask if you all are contemplating an additional answer about teaming for Category 1. It would be super helpful if that came sooner than 10 days before it's due. That's a pretty significant question that consultants work through teaming and how to propose. So the most you can do, really appreciate it, but I realize it's holidays and stuff.
Definitely recognize that. Yeah, we'll do our best.
Thank you.
Jamin.
Hi, and sorry if you already answered this question, but on the work product 3.1, the equitable engagement, when we're conceiving of a project implementation plan for that work product and a budget, should we think about that as a standalone engagement contract separate from any other larger housing project? And then conversely, if we're thinking about our budgets for a particular or a kind of a typical housing implementation plan or production strategy, should we consider whether those would be supplemented by an equitable engagement project that kind of runs in tandem with, maybe it's under a separate contract, but runs in tandem with that kind of project? Just trying to think of kind of how those two are related in terms of costing and contracting.
Yeah, Ethan, unless you have thoughts, I mean, personally to me, I think standalone makes the most sense in the context of like the expectation is that you would be reviewing like practices related to engagement for individual like cities or individual projects, that type of thing. And that's a little bit different than just like integrating with a housing implementation plan. Those two don't necessarily mesh super well. It's more like a meta project, right, rather than an individual project.
Yeah, that's a way to describe it. I would describe this as an advisor, an equitable engagement advisor to local governments who need it, or to consultant teams that need it, to DLCD that needs it. Somebody you can plug and play, or just be part of a standalone project. And also with building that kind of toolkit at the end.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, we're just like a minute away from wrap up. Does anyone have one final quick question? All right. So just to wrap things up then, once again, the RFP closes on July 28th at 5 p.m. That's a Friday. Your proposals must be received no later than 5 p.m. or they will be considered non-valid. So please make sure that you understand the process for getting your proposals submitted within Oregon Buys. Within the RFP, there is a link that you can go to that will provide some instructions if you're not aware of already how to post on Oregon Buys. I will be opening the proposals the following Monday. And at that time, I will review them for responsiveness. What that means is that I will review each proposal to make sure that all of the pertinent information that's asked for in the RFP is included in your proposal. If there is something missing, if one of the attachments is not included, I have to consider your response then non-responsive, and we cannot move forward with it. So make sure that you have all of the required information attached to your proposal. We will then begin our review process. If you're not familiar with the process, we will form a scoring team to evaluate and rank and score the proposals. After that is complete, that process could potentially take up to 3 to 4 weeks. It just depends on how many proposals we receive. I am estimated a potential notice to intent or an intent to word notice that will be sent out via email somewhere around the 1st of September. It could vary though based on other factors. That's just an approximate date at this point. And then that would lead us then into the contract negotiation stage, which would probably be running September, October, possibly into November. So is there any questions in regard to any of that information I just provided? Okay, if not, then I think we can wrap up. I appreciate all of you attending. I hope that this was informative. Again, we will talk internally and try to come up with an answer regarding the unanswered questions. And if need be, I will post in a few further amendment or addendum to the RFP to address those unanswered questions.
Yeah, thank you everybody for listening to a bunch of housing planners talk about procurement for an hour and a half. Much appreciated.
Yeah, and thank you for asking us hard questions.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, y'all. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.